Hi, I'm Laura, and I'm not neurotypical, and this is my husband.
Hi, I'm Dylan, and I'm neurotypical.
So, when we first met, we were friends, and it was like never gonna happen. Ever. I was married. You had a girlfriend that you were living with, so it was pretty serious. We have a pretty wide age gap, which is pretty common for autistic people, but I didn't know that at the time.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. And it was this weird attraction, like otherworldly, we always say. Like, we just had to talk all the time. And I didn't know it at the time. You had told me that you just didn't talk to people a lot.
Yeah.
And we talked you were pursuing me a lot and texting me a lot, and we kind of became best friends. And I had really, really low self-esteem at the time. I was kind of like going through a hard time. And you were the cool metal guy. And I don't know, I just like, in my head, it was just never going to happen. So I was very myself with you.
Yeah.
From the beginning, there was a lot of friendships and stuff that I would mask a lot with. But you were so wild that I felt like I could just like say or do anything. And I found a huge comfort in that, because that was really rare for me to kind of feel like I could just be myself.
Right.
I don't think I ever had that. And especially now, like definitely with how our relationship is now, I never ever had that. And I think that I just really was drawn to you deeply, probably because of that, because I just felt so comfortable.
Right.
And you were not judgmental at all and very accepting, but you also pursued me a lot.
Yeah, I did.
Not right away. As I said, I was married at the time. It was not going well. It was the end of a marriage, and it was an amicable divorce, and it wasn't too crazy or anything, but we, were together before I was officially divorced.
Yeah, I earned you by conquest. And I think it's interesting when you say that, it was like a prelude to unmasking.
Yeah, it was.
Everything was just right so that you were basically unmasked.
Yeah, I was. Also, I think because it just seemed like we were just friends, and that was never going to happen. We had such obvious attraction to each other.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like one of those live free, wild moments that I never thought was actually going to get serious. So it was just like fun. We just had a lot of fun.
Right.
And I think that you also could kind of be yourself with me more so than at least other women in your past, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I met you, I won't go too deep into it, but he did have a girlfriend, and it was kind of known around town that he was in a band and would have a little fun,
Yeah, stars align.
But I knew that.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I wasn't really worried about that with you. In my head, I was like, whatever, he's so cool and fun, we can just have fun. And then shockingly, you got a lot more serious like quicker than I expected with me. Like once we when I was fully separated and everything, you got really serious. But we didn't obviously know I was autistic at the time, but what kind of drew, as a neurotypical person, by the way, he has a college degree, very academic, very neurotypical. His brain works very much like a brain is supposed to work, except with communication. I think that's a little bit of a weakness, which doesn't help because
Disagree.
that's a weakness for me too.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe your communication is really great.
I think it's tremendous.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
It's not tremendous in our relationship.
Well,
both ways.
We'll get there in the podcast.
Yeah. But I think that, what was it about me that kind of, I don't know, made you pursue me so much?
Well, physical attraction was a big piece. But I think beyond that, you were funny in a way that most girls are not. You didn't have that. You kind of subverted all expectations of, how a girl acts in social situations or whatever. And you were really funny, and you roasted people, and that was that was something that I really enjoyed doing, and you did it just as good as I did.
Yeah. And we talk about roasting, but like when you think back, it was just me being autistic.
You were just being autistic.
Like I was
calling things as they were, but it was so funny because
yeah.
your viewpoint, and even now when we go places, it's still really funny. And maybe folks who are listening who are a mixed, neurodivergent and neurotypical couple, like if you and I go out to a restaurant, you point out things that are hilarious that I might not notice or notice peripherally, but when you point it out and the way you lay it out, it's really funny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've said this on the podcast before, I believe, but growing up in this area actually is good if you're autistic because you can just kind of say whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So while I still had many, many social challenges, I just learned early that I could totally speak my mind, but if I spin it as a joke, it's totally okay in this area.
Do people know where we are, where you live?
Philadelphia.
Yeah. So Philadelphians are known as being brutally honest, and
right.
They will be the nicest people in the world to you, help you up, give you the shirt off their back, so they say. But they will also call you out directly to your face, which doesn't happen in a lot of other cities or suburbs.
Probably New York, Philly, probably Baltimore a little bit. It's kind of like that. But beyond that, not too many cities. Maybe Boston too.
Yeah.
But pretty much just this area. But Philly especially is known for just calling it as it is. It's a very blue-collar area, no playing. But everything's also a joke at the same time in this area. And that's why it's good where you can kind of spin it. So, yeah. Was there ever a time where... Please answer honestly. But was there ever a time where you were kind of thinking like, maybe there's something not quite right with me? Just on a deeper, intimate level, have you ever been like, maybe she should get something checked out?
Daily basis.
Yeah.
No. I mean, and maybe it's part of the masking process or whatever, but there were a lot of things that you could explain, and I took the explanations, like issues with holding a job consistently. I thought about them, but you would explain it, and in my head, maybe it's a one-off, whatever. So maybe that would be like an indicator.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've been very honest about that. Everyone knows I had many, many job struggles.
And even the way you've left jobs.
Yeah. It's always me.
Yeah.
I rarely got fired.
Yeah.
It happened, but it was more me just like getting out of there.
Right.
But not so much. That was before you, most of that. Like I was doing better, but at a higher expense. It was a lot more masking. I really struggled in that last job.
Yeah, and the last job you were at, you shared an office with someone, and you would text me on a daily basis about what she was eating and how loud it was, if she was crunching on chips or eating an apple.
She's eating apples again.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's so hot. I forgot about that, but yeah.
So I do want to talk about how we found out, and I know you've probably shared the story with everyone, but our son was diagnosed with autism first, and then I'll never forget the night. I was sitting on the couch, Laura was upstairs, and she ran down, and I thought something was wrong, the look on your face.
Yeah.
And you were like, I just took this test, and then it was like a come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
For you, and then for me, once things set in, and then I took the test.
Well, I made you because I thought, I mean, I've been over my side of all this. It's funny. Like, I remember running down the stairs and you going, what's wrong? And me being like, I took the AQ and it's really high. Like, I think I'm autistic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't be autistic. Like, I'm not, like, am I?
Right.
And then I asked you, you're like, I don't know. You didn't really react. I think you were kind of like nervous to react or something. You're like, what? And I'm like, well, you have to take it because there's no way you're autistic. And if you score like similar to me, I'll know it's correct.
Right.
And then you took it and like I was a 40 out of 50 and you scored like a 13 out of 50. It was like pretty low, maybe 16, but it was like really low. And then I was like, crap. And then I made my mom and sister take it because I knew they would not be high either. And my mom scored a 0.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Or maybe like a 2 or a 3, like really low. But I'm pretty sure it was a 0. And my sister was like an 8.
Wow.
So very low. And like all 3 of you are like readers, really good at academics and all of that. So I knew like if you 3 scored really low and I scored really high, that we were like on to something. And then I still wasn't sure then. And I think after that night though, everything was different for us.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you? Like what was going on in your head? Because a lot of this processing for me has been alone.
Mm-hmm.
What is it from that night? What was it like for you?
Well, a lot of it was surreal. I think the background I had and the understanding I had of autism was very limited. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're not in that world, you only know the extreme cases. You know, you think nonverbal children or something like that.
Or like a cognitive disability is what most people think of and all of that. Right.
And, you know, I knew that I didn't know the full scope of things. I wasn't in that world. I know there's people in that world, but I wasn't. And
you do typically come into things with a pretty open mind. Like in general, you're not normally like rush to judgment kind of person.
Yes. No, yeah, I like to think about things carefully and kind of take in all the information.
Which is really good for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a rush to judgment, for sure.
So, you know, it was processing that and realizing, like, the paradigm that we're living in, where we're in a kind of transitional state where, I don't know, 50 years ago, if you had autism, you were a ward of the state. But it's moving away from that, obviously. So society as a whole is in a weird transformational state. A lot more adults are getting diagnosed as adults.
Well, a lot more kids are getting diagnosed too than before.
Yes, the rate for kids is really high.
Right.
So, and it's a lot different. You know, there's a lot of resources as we move down the timeline. When our kids get diagnosed, there's a lot of resources in school, in home, with doctors for kids. But there's not a lot of that for adults.
There's none of it. And even the diagnostic criteria, there is no DSM diagnostic criteria for adults.
Right.
Even now. And so that even when you research, it's just kind of anecdotal research for adults at this point, for the most part. And even the studies are still talking to adults, and it's still anecdotal, statistics.
Right.
So for the most part, there's been some decent studies, but it's nothing that is, like for me, I would, not that all I care about is the DSM, but I would feel a lot better if they would come out with adult criteria and show the differences, because it is very different. I mean, now that you have, 3 kids with it, and then me, I think I wonder, like, can you see how different it is for an adult than a kid? I know we're all 3 so different, so it's hard.
All 4 of you are very different in how
all 4
in how you are. So yeah, I can definitely see the differences. I mean, we'll have to see. We'll see in 30 years what the kids are like
Yeah.
as adults, or even 20 years, whatever. But I think the other thing too is that you're a woman, and that is under-researched as well. You know, so understanding that we're in a kind of unexplored territory.
Yeah.
So it makes it difficult, but it also makes it exciting because it was rewarding for me to watch you process everything. And, you went through days where you were kind of upset about it, kind of in crisis about it.
Very much. It was very complex. Like the most complex thing I've ever been through.
Right. And I tried to put myself in...
And I've been through a lot of complex things.
Right. And I tried to put myself in your shoes to understand one day you wake up and, the last 20 years of your life are, everything's normal. And then you hear this news and it kind of shatters your whole understanding of the world and your experience as a person. And, I'm sitting there trying to imagine that, and it's, it's not the same as going through it.
Right.
But also,
and I had to ask you a lot of questions along the way. Like, do you struggle with this? Like, what's, it was definitely Pandora's box because, the hardest thing for me was deep down, I always knew. I mean, I remember having a conversation with you. Like, I feel like I have something else than ADHD. Like, we've had that conversation. Right. I've talked to doctors about it, and just kind of been like, you're fine. Like, you can talk, you're fine. They do that. And the realization of, like, things have always not been okay. But the hardest realization for me was that I really didn't get it. Anything. I know that sounds terrible, but there were so many social situations that I didn't get, and so many things that I didn't get, and now I get it. But it was like the knowledge,
right? But
it's also depressing to like think back and be like, I didn't get any of it.
Right.
I wasn't like understanding, and I don't know. Like, I can't go back and relive my life as a young person with the knowledge.
Right.
And I don't even know if that would have helped then. It helps me now, in a lot of situations, but I was a lot different back then. And I don't know, that's the hardest thing, is that realization that I didn't get a lot of stuff. And a lot of my struggles were actually a lot worse than I was letting on. And I knew that deep down, but
yeah, it was very deep. And that's part of that Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Where you would look back on things. You would look back at your life with a fine-tooth comb and everything.
And we talked about a lot of it.
Into that, you would bring it up at one point or another.
Yeah.
And that happened for me too. When I would think through things and like, oh, maybe that was a weird social situation. And then, okay, yeah.
Can you think of a specific?
Going out with friends and maybe you talking over people.
Really?
Yeah. Like
see, I don't even know,
coming in at an inappropriate time during conversation where the conversation is organically maybe going this way, and then you might come in on top of it and pull it in a different direction.
So why didn't you ever mention that to me? I mean, I know I do that.
Before your diagnosis?
Well, yeah, if we were like out with friends or whatever, like, were you ever embarrassed or like kind of like...
No, I was never embarrassed. I mean, it is, I guess, what it is. You are who you are, regardless of if you have a diagnosis or not. And that happened before you got a diagnosis.
Right, but
you just in my head, it's just you got a strong personality and you're trying to talk about this.
Well, I do.
Right, which is fine. And I think that was another point I
just
wanted
think
to
it's
say.
funny because, like, we've never talked about that.
Right. But that is something I wanted to say, that, when you're receiving this news or you receive a diagnosis, it doesn't change who you are. You were an autistic person. Right. A person with autism. Right. However you say it.
I say autistic.
Okay.
But I think...
Before and after the diagnosis. Yeah. And no matter where that comes in your timeline, it doesn't change, the essence of who you are.
Right. It's just the chance to kind of make sense of some things, and then also normally the chance to get, specific treatment and things like that. But with this adult diagnosis, there's not really many options.
Right. One other thing I wanted to say from my experience of watching you process everything was, like we said, it opened up Pandora's box. You had a little bit of despair, a lot of questioning, a lot of ruminating. But you eventually sublimated all those anguishy feelings into something positive, which is good. And I knew you would, but it wasn't anything that anyone could push you into. It was something you had to come to yourself.
I definitely did. And we did talk a lot about all of that.
But I know... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know for me, too, there's not much I can do for you as an adult, compared to like what we can do with the kids or whatever. But it did like instantly make me an advocate. And I'll share the story of at work. There was a presentation, and it was about dealing with difficult people in the workplace, and it was humorous, and there were different types of people. Like Michael Scott was brought up as a narcissist.
Or just like making it all about me in the workplace kind of thing, right?
And that was funny. And it was like tips. It was, it was like a manager seminar type of thing, and tips on how to navigate these difficult people. And for the most part, it was in good fun. But there was one portion where Dr. Spock, I guess, from Star Trek, I don't know, was one of the personality types. And
robotic, right? Was the
robotic? Yes, robotic was the descriptor. And the facilitator of this seminar said, this might be a person who is who you describe as spectrumy, and then went on to describe tips on how to deal with that or navigate that.
Do you remember the tips?
No, I don't. But after you having that diagnosis, me hearing that, red flags went off, and I was like, whoa, that's, that might be
And we had just dealt with the Joe Rogan spectrumy comment that I was all fired up about.
Yeah, and it was the same spectrum. It was that same word.
Exact word.
That,
and I was upset because I'm like, now people are going to like use that as an adjective, and it's considered, there's no world where spectrumy is like going to be used in a positive way. Right. Like when someone says that. So, we had just like dealt with that as well. Right.
So it changed my whole thinking, because if I would have heard that before you and the kids were diagnosed, I just would have, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But I did, and it really stuck with me as I sat through the rest of the seminar. So I went up to the facilitator afterwards, and I said, you might want to think about not using that word. And, it might alienate some people in the audience or whatever. And I said, my wife and my 3 kids have been diagnosed over the last year with autism. And, you might not want to say that, just liken spectrumy to difficult to deal with.
Right.
Because...
And you also, I remember you said that you don't know who's in your audience, too.
Right.
And who has a kid that's diagnosed and all that.
Or whatever.
Right.
And while you're definitely difficult to deal with, I don't think that was appropriate for her to say. And I'm not a cancel culture person or a dictate who says what person or PC.
You're not at all. I was actually really shocked that you said something.
Like
and I was really proud of you.
I totally believe that people should say whatever they want about whatever they want in any circumstance.
And I don't feel that way. So we differ there.
We do. And I think that I understand that words hurt and things like that. But at the end of the day, they're just words. But that's just me. That's
so neurotypical of you.
That's very neurotypical of me. Like Ari, the comedian Ari Schaefer, or Shafir, or whatever, made a joke about Kobe after he died, and he got cancel cultured or whatever.
Did he actually get canceled though?
Yeah, he got like dropped from his management team and everything. But I think it's fine. I think it's,
It was just a joke about him being a rapist, though, right?
Well, he always puts down celebrities when they die. That's what he does. And I
mean,
like,
I see the nuance with comedians. That's kind of their job. Some of them, like if they're a shock comedian,
right.
It's kind of weird to like cancel a shock, like someone who does that for a living and made their living that way, and then all of a sudden there's like one thing.
Right. Yeah. Like
that's weird for me. But like politicians or people of legitimate power who are saying like extremely hurtful things about a group of people, I'm never going to be okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I think,
but this woman was
you're doing the thing
high up in your business, right?
She was high up in my business, but I just on the point of cancel culture and everything like that. I think that me personally, like I have heroes, but on the other hand, it's funny to see people's heroes or idols being torn down. That's all that was, as far as cancel culture. In this arena, yes, the woman who's facilitating was high up in my organization, and I thought it was good for her to know that. And I would never want to alienate anyone for any reason at all, especially in that setting. Especially in that setting. So I did say something to her. She was very receptive to what I said. She said that previously, instead of the Star Trek guy, it was Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, which might even, and she said somebody said something to her about that.
So she changed it to Spectrum-y instead of Rain Man.
Yeah. And, but I think that's a difficult thing to battle too, right? Because Rain Man is, I mean, not for young people, but has seeped into the culture of like,
right.
That's an early example of Rain Man. And when I was in high school and took a AP psychology class, we like watched segments from Rain Man, and that's, that is what it is. But
and
I think
people get annoyed too, because that's like the smallest percentage of autistic people are like that neurotype of autistic. Like,
right. I've never met anyone like Rain Man.
Right. It's very rare to be a savant in like one area. Like normally it's not. I mean, there's some autistic people that are not a savant in anything.
Right.
Some are, considered savants, but it's more because they've hyper focused on something for so long. It's not that they're actually just like a genius, in a certain area.
Right.
So there's a lot of odd stereotypes from media.
Right. But I think it's important to note that we culturally are in a time of change with stuff like this and everything that's going on, of that not being the norm. That when someone says autistic, neurotypicals don't think of Rain Man anymore, hopefully. So watching that part of your journey was, like I said, rewarding. I don't know. It's still a work in progress. Everything.
Yeah, very much. I'm processing everything as I go still with all of you. But I think, you talked about my harder times during processing and then kind of like overcoming them. Mm-hmm. But now looking back, I'm realizing it was really like mourning the loss of this person that I thought I was, and then I wasn't. And it really ended up being not the diagnosis of autism that was so hard. It was the realization that I was masking and like just confused and had all of these struggles that I didn't understand, but then getting the opportunity to understand them even just a little before middle age, but even before middle age, was good. And I would say 90% of my outlook with just thinking about all of the issues of autism and all that is very positive.
Yeah.
But there's also negative, like at least 10% of negatives that affect me on a daily basis, especially after taking the mask off and the sensory issues I've uncovered and all of that. And I'm, struggling to figure out how to manage that, which is, hard for you in the relationship. Like we recently kind of had a fight where, over the last 6 months, I've been explaining sensory overload to you and what it means and how it's not like a pain, but it hurts and you can't explain it. And there's nothing, like, you just have to get away and lock yourself in a cave, or at least me. And we know that. And they're not every night, but there are days when you come home from work, and we have 3 kids. So that's what I'm doing during the day for the most part, is 2 toddlers and a 4th grader. And you get home 5:30, and there are some days where I just have to go upstairs, right. Which of course isn't easy for you, but you know, we struggle with that communication there, because I know it's not your dream to like come home and just from a hard day of work and just taking over the kids, but for me it's just like, why can't he just understand that it's not every night, and I'm only doing this because I really need to, or whatever.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We had a fight about that.
It was a big one.
It was a big one. You know, I've been having a long week at work, and I work for 10 hours, and I came home, and you were already up in bed with the girls, and I brought them down and made them dinner and played and changed diapers and washed dishes and everything like that. And I was getting them ready for bed. And, you know, I guess the other piece is I'm trying to prevent them from coming up the steps to go see you because I know you're in sensory overload.
Right.
And I was getting them ready for bed or doing something, and I said something to you, whatever. And I said, it's like I'm a single dad.
Well, this is what happened. You came in the room and put a book down, you know, whatever book you're currently reading, and you just gave me a look that is just not, like normally when I'm in bed and you know I'm experiencing sensory overload, you come in and you say like, can I get you anything? You're actually like really like, for the most part, very supportive of that. But you came in and just kind of gave me a look and dropped the book and then just like walked out. And I was like, wait, what, you know, what's wrong? And I had been in bed, you know, for at least an hour at this point. It was a while. So we hadn't seen or talked in a little bit. And I was like, wait, what's wrong? And you're like, nothing's wrong, nothing, you know, like kind of doing that. And whenever you do that, I know something's wrong. And I was like, well, why are you being like passive aggressive? And you said, I'm not being passive aggressive, but I can be aggressive if you want. And I was like, what did I do? And in what's going through my head at the time was, we've talked about this. He knows, you know, I'm here because I'm experiencing like, you know, what feels like pain, you know, like I'm not handling things well. I need this, and it really is not every night, right?
It was very frequently the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I've been struggling the last 2 weeks, but in my head it was just like I have to do this.
Right.
And what was going through your head, like when I was just kind of like,
so yeah, it puts
what is going on.
So, spoiler alert: the thing that got us out of this fight was good communication. But in my head. And yes, I know about sensory overload, but also for me as a neurotypical, and I might not be typical of all neurotypicals, but I'm very practical minded and thinking about like what we have to do. You know, we have 2 toddlers and a 9-year-old. So there's a million different dependencies and things we got to do before bedtime, everything like that.
And all 3 of them are on the spectrum and special needs. So it's like,
so I'm so focused on the tasks that I need to get done that it's not in the forefront of my mind that you're laying in bed because you're in almost physical pain because of the noise beating your ears took all day.
Right.
In my mind, I just worked for 10 hours. I just did a million things. I still got a million more things to do. Not that I need you to help me out or that I want you to help me out. That's where my mind is. So I'm not taking that step back to think, you know, she's in bed because she's experiencing this overload. I'm not thinking that you're in bed because you're lazy, but some people might think that. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't think that, but.
I think you definitely, even though you knew I was in bed, I mean, you were angry.
Yeah.
Not at me, just at this. Like, I could tell that you weren't necessarily, like, angry at me or frustrated. You were very frustrated. I wouldn't say angry.
Yeah.
And you said, in a moment of anger, I feel like a single dad.
Yeah.
And it hurt a lot. For one, because in my head, it's like, he knows, like, why would he say that? Like I want to be here. Like, I want to be in bed when my family's all downstairs playing and having fun, or just like a typical night. Why, like, you know, hearing that made me feel like you were, like, almost like trying not to understand, or equating it to laziness, or just like, I don't have to help, so I'm just going to be in bed. Like, that's kind of like what that felt like.
Yeah, and that's not what I was saying. It was more like, I came home from work, I didn't see you, I did everything myself, I played with all the kids myself, and, like, missed your presence. But of course I was angry. It came out angry. Sounds like a jerk thing to say. Anyway, the way we got out of it was communication, and basically the things that we just said. You know, maybe I needed to hear you say that you didn't want to be in bed. And, like, of course I knew that, but like I said, when your mind's going a mile a minute and you're doing a million things, you don't take a second to stop and think about that. And for you having autism and having to deal with all these sensory issues, it's not a visible issue. I don't look at you and say, she can't take these sounds, or she can't take these lights. You can't see it.
Right, like in Gigi, you can see the sensory stuff affecting her.
Georgia is very, like, animated. She'll cover her ears.
Well, and it's any noise, like it's like an ambulance.
If there's a noise,
right?
Or come up to you if there's an ambulance going by. But you sit there and take it, and there's no way for me to tell the difference between when you're in sensory overload or you're sitting there happy.
Right.
So, you know, that plays a part. And I wanted you down there, and, you know, I didn't come out and say it calmly and, you know, with everyone's feelings in mind. I just said, it's like I'm a single dad. And it was. It was like, that's what a single dad does. They come home and they cook some stupid pasta for their kids, and then they wrestle for a half hour, and then they put them to bed. You know?
Right. So you're saying I should have just taken you literally at face value?
I meant it at face value. I don't know. I mean, it's a deep thing to unpack. I didn't say it to hurt you, but
I know.
You know, whatever. I'm sure this happens to all the people listening out there.
Thank you for opening up about that.
You're welcome.
I missed you too. Like, that's one thing I really want, you know, any neurotypical partners out there. It's really important to know that when your partner is struggling and isolating themselves in some way, it's not because they want to. It's not because typically they're up there beating themselves about it too. But they're beating themselves up about it too. They're like, I was up there. I had a really hard day that day. But it wasn't necessarily just that day. It had kind of been building. I had expressed, you know, my struggles with you, and it kind of just, came to a head. Like, I just couldn't even deal with it. And then after you even said that, like, I was so upset, but we didn't even fight, like, right away. I was just like, just close the door. I was like, just close the door, because I didn't even have the energy or even the capacity to even fight with you or clarify what the heck that meant or any of that. It was just like, okay, close the door. Let me get back to my cave. But it's so important to know that the person who is isolating themselves and literally suffering in some way at the time is not doing it because it's easier or because they want to. It's because they're literally trying to get through that moment. Yeah. Which I get. I can see, you know, looking in the moment, I can't see. But looking back, I see what you said. I see how it's probably so confusing for you, because a lot of the time there's no warning. Right. I mean, sometimes I text you and I'm like, it's rough today. But sometimes I don't even go up when I say that. Right. Like, go, you know, do my whole sensory routine. Right. So it's hard to know. And you are a routine guy. you do have some autistic traits, which is good for us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're very routine based.
Mm-hmm.
So when your routine gets off whack, you also don't like that. So those nights where I'm just running upstairs does throw you off too.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to it not being a visual thing where
Right.
if I had a neurotypical wife and she was doing some of those things, it would mean that she was being lazy or XYZ.
Right.
But it doesn't in this case. And
Or,
6 months, a year, however long we are.
I mean, is it really though? I mean, it would probably more be like depression or something mental health related. Anyway, like, is there really
there's
like
lazy people who just got cockroaches running around and stuff?
Yeah.
I think.
So Jessica asked or says that housework has always been a challenge for her and her partner, so she's curious. How do you guys handle chores and financial responsibilities and paying bills? Do you have a schedule, or do you split up the task, or is it whoever gets it first deal, or how does it work?
Good question, Jessica. It's pretty much, we each have our own strengths and weaknesses, and we do those.
We kind of team
split up. We team it up, and if there's anything that doesn't,
and we
fit
rely
in
on
either
communication
team,
for like those days that I just can't do it.
Yeah, I think we handle it pretty well. I think I enjoy washing dishes and you don't.
Right.
So I do it. I don't mind.
Even though you're not very good at it.
Disagree. So I think we split it.
We split up laundry. You do your laundry.
Yeah, I hate.
Yeah, I like the mundane
computers and stuff like that. So you do all the bills and everything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we just kind of split it all up based on what we kind of like to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a couple that doesn't like to do anything, that sucks. But we kind of do what we, or like better capabilities of doing. So Elizabetta asked, is it one's duty to get married? What does marriage mean to you as combined neurodivergent, neurotypical, and why marriage? I will say that traditional marriage was very important to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it one's duty to get married? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the person, but I think...
Yeah. I think the person has to decide if that's their own duty.
It's built in our genetic code to want to reproduce, and I definitely felt that. I definitely wanted to have a family.
You always talked about wanting a lot of kids.
Yeah.
But I wasn't definitely not going to have too many kids.
Yeah.
3 is good. And what does marriage mean to us? Well, for one, when we were getting married and everything, I guess we did. I mean, I knew I was neurodivergent because I was ADHD as a kid and all that. But it just didn't matter.
No,
none of that mattered.
It really didn't factor in.
Our chemistry and connection mattered more than anything.
Yeah.
We never talked about. I mean, I definitely remember processing and thinking about the fact that like I was so jealous about how you could just like do everything and easily and just like sit and read all night and like just go to work. Like you just go to work. like just not no struggles. You of course have struggles, but I mean like when I think about my issues, like just none of that. Like you wake up and go to work. There's not much negative thought. Like it's just what you do. I don't know if it's
no trepidation about it.
No. And me, like when I did go to work, I mean every day it's like I don't want to go to work, and like it's like a thing, and I have to pep talk myself and all of that. So I definitely noticed our brain differences always. Yeah. But just never mattered.
Yeah, I was just likened it to a personality difference or something like that.
Yeah. And we've always said that we even each other out the right way.
Yeah.
And I think we do, for the most part. So next question. Oh, she did want to add in there thoughts on what marriage really means. And I'm on my second marriage, and the first one didn't mean anything because it was a mistake. Both parties agreed to that. So marriage in general, is a piece of paper, but
Right.
you can be in a marriage that literally is just a piece of paper, which I've been through. But our marriage really means the world to me. Like it's a very deep connection that we have. You're definitely not perfect, but I know I have someone who, even if you don't support me in the way I need, I know that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really, really matters to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working through all of these challenges together, but I've never had, like, you can call anyone a partner,
Mm-hmm.
but I never had a partner
Right.
until I was with you. So marriage with you means so much different than I ever thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I also grew up with parents who were in a horrible marriage.
Right.
And most of the married people I knew growing up were not in a good marriage. And
Right.
I remember in my 20s, it was like, in my young 20s, it was like, I'm never going to get married, on my second. But,
Yeah, I think
definitely depends on the marriage,
Yeah,
what it means.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a changing definition of what it means, when you're a kid or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
marriage is this something that you idolize, but now it's where we are right now. It's like two people agreeing to support each other,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of,
No matter what.
yeah.
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 Yeah. It's more for me. Bethany asked, how did you, like, when we were first together, how did I communicate about my ADHD like neurodivergence at first compared to now? And that was also kind of a evolution because we got together when I was running away from all my neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, well, the more kids I had, the more it was like, I have to deal with this.
Right.
Because, when it's just you can kind of just, skinning your teeth, get by, and it's okay. But when you add every kid you add, it's just like harder and harder and harder to manage executive functioning. So especially after my third child, it was like, I have to go. I remember we had a conversation and I said, I have to go deal with ADHD
Right.
again.
Yeah.
And you were very supportive. You were like, go do it. You're
Yeah.
like, what are you waiting for? Kind of thing. And then you even like kind of held me accountable when I kind of put it off a little bit, and you're like, just go do it.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think, the way you communicated to me was you were diagnosed with ADD as a child and, you're medicated for a while, stopped taking your meds. And I don't think, for the way I grew up, I don't think there was any stigma around that. I knew plenty of kids with
Mm-hmm.
ADHD and kids who took their meds and kids who didn't, and kids who were into not eating high fructose corn syrup
Mm-hmm.
because of their ADHD.
Right.
So, no stigma there. And then, when it came to a point.
What about
where
me? Do you
needed-
remember like pre-medicated me and after? Was there a change? It's been years now. I don't even remember.
Yeah, you've been medicated for years. I
know.
Before you were medicated, you were having issues at your job.
Yeah. Yeah, the medication did kind of help that. It helped the functioning piece, but it didn't help the anxiety and all that I had. But I didn't even know it was anxiety. Anusha asks, how did your partner react when he found out? And I want to do it like, I'll answer that for me, like my perspective, and then you can kind of answer.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, it was he let me take the lead on it. You were not judgmental at all, which was very refreshing for me. There was quite a few times, especially in the beginning, like, I support you, do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I kind of wavered on if I was going to get a diagnosis or not too, and you're like, go, if you can, go do it, kind of thing. And yeah, I think you reacted not necessarily negative or positive. You were just kind of there for me when I needed you, like kind of thing. Like it wasn't, I don't know. What was your perspective? How did you react? Were you ever like, oh my God, I married an autistic person? Like,
well, no. I mean, well, yeah, we said to each other, like, jokingly, like, how did we not know?
well, yeah,
But
yeah.
never in a negative, like,
Right.
what the hell's wrong with me type of thing.
Right.
For me, I think it was just more semantically a label, but the label doesn't change anything. Your behavior before you got diagnosed
Right.
and after is the same. So yeah, I don't know. It really didn't.
It wasn't.
I don't think I had I definitely didn't have a negative reaction.
Was it harder for you? Was it more like you just dealing with me processing it more than the realization of me being autistic?
Yeah, I think that was more of a heavy lift than just processing it.
Right.
But I'm sure it's not that way for most people.
Right.
Or not most people, just for some people. I'm sure it varies.
Well, I would say someone who is a little more prone to stigma, it might be more negative or something, or like, because we already had kids, someone who's, I'm sure it can get more negative than what, but you're not really that kind of person.
Get more negative. And I would say for people who are neurotypical, and if you get a diagnosis and you have to tell your neurotypical boyfriend or whatever, give that person some time to process it too. Maybe the reaction is a kind of knee-jerk, gut wrench, whatever type of reaction, but that might be because of the stigma, not because how the person really feels, and they might need some time to think about it and process it.
And we think about how like uneducated we were about it, and it was me. I was autistic, and I was extremely uneducated, and of course you were too.
Right.
Yeah, so a lot of the reactions are, if they're negative, are typically based on lack of education.
Right, but if someone has a negative reaction, they could turn it around and accept it. Or if they don't, then it's probably not somebody you want to be with anyway. So.
Yes, true that. Emma asks, where do you begin to decode your relationship and communication struggles? Which we have.
Yeah, we have. I think it's a daily thing. It's really just taking that step back. I mean, we don't have communication struggles with every conversation we have, but when we do, it helps us to take a step back. And that the diagnosis has helped that, because previously it might have just been,
you thought I was
you
difficult.
go your separate
you thought I was
ways.
difficult.
I think you're difficult. You think I'm being
An
unrealistic
a-hole.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, this gives us a framework to take a step back and say, hey, how can I be better for my wife, and how can you think, how can you be better?
How can I I think honestly, like when I take a step back and think about it, it's probably very basic ND/NT communication struggles, because it's just sometimes we just have a disconnect, and I don't really know where it is. It's not necessarily all you or all me. Yeah. It's just a disconnect.
Right.
A lot of the time.
And that happens to any couple.
Right. But I think, our communication struggles are just that. Like we just sometimes say things we don't mean, and it's hard to decode that for me, or like I'm not communicating what I'm really thinking very well, and you do that too.
Yeah.
So I would say sometimes there's a disconnect, and then sometimes it's just generic couple bickering.
Yeah, just universal stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a mix. Emma also asked, do you have meltdown and burnout prevention plans, or is there diffusion strategies that you use? And what?
I was going to answer the question.
Go ahead.
I was going to say no, not a regimented official protocol for burnout or meltdowns, but we do. I think we handle it pretty well. Like, if you communicate that you need whatever, I'll take.
Right. We had that one fight recently, but most nights I'm like, I'm sorry, I have to go upstairs and just decompress, and 9 out of 10 times, like, you're totally cool with that.
Yeah, or if I notice that you're super stressed out or going through whatever, I'll take the kids out to the park.
Or you'll tell me, like, go ahead and go upstairs. Or, yeah.